I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. When the Runcam Split came out, many hailed it as a way of getting GoPro quality footage on quadcopters that never could have hoped to carry a GoPro. Small quads, like down in the 3-inch, or some even said the 2-inch range. But the Runcam Split was still a little bit big for some of those quads. And Runcam is never one to rest on their laurels. In fact, they kind of come out with products so fast I can barely keep up. I don't know how Oscar Leong does it. But anyway, that's not the point. What you're looking at right now is the Runcam Split V2, and this is the Runcam Split Mini, a Runcam Split for quadcopters running a 20mm stack, even smaller and lighter than the original. And we're going to look at the Runcam Split Mini, and I never did cover the Runcam Split V2, so we'll get that too. Stay tuned. There's no doubt that the Runcam Split V1 was a really innovative product. Anybody who says that Chinese companies can only clone and copy and never do anything original just needs to look at the Runcam Split to see that that's not true. It wasn't the first camera to take the guts of a high-def camera and separate them from a lens module. GoPro did that, and actually the Mobius is the first camera I can think of from a few years ago that had a separate lens module that you could mount on your quad in some convenient way and not have to stick the whole thing on the top plate. But the Runcam Split was the first one I know of that put the guts of the camera on a 36mm board so you could mount it on your flight control stack. But the Split V1 was not a perfect product. For one thing, it took 5-volt power only, which is a little confusing in this day and age. Some people suggested that the reason for that was that the Split V1 was actually the guts of a Runcam 3. You may recall the Runcam 3 was the camera that Runcam released. It was very similar in form factor to a GoPro Hero Session. In fact, GoPro apparently also thought it was a little too similar to a Hero Session. They sent Runcam a nasty legalgram saying basically you're infringing on something and you have to stop. And Runcam pulled the Runcam 3 off the market. And then shortly thereafter, the Runcam Split came out, and some people said, I wonder if the Split is actually just the guts of a Runcam 3 put on a 36mm board. And that might explain why it's powered off of 5 volts, or the V1 had a input for a 1-cell LiPo too, which who's going to run it off a 1-cell LiPo? Well, if it was in a Runcam 3, then it would be powered off a 1-cell LiPo. Anyway, not only did it take 5 volts power, but it needed a lot of it. It needed like 600 milliamps of power. And if the voltage sagged even a little bit, it would drop out. It was also very prone to video noise if you didn't have absolutely clean power, so it was not the most convenient to use. Another problem with the Split V1 is that it didn't protect the USB port from the 5-volt pads from the LiPo input. You could backfeed the regulator on your flight controller, or you could draw too much power from your USB port and cause problems. Finally, the Wi-Fi module on the Split V1 was pretty hard to mount. It fit in there really tightly and wasn't very convenient. I'm happy to say, though, that with the Split V2, Runcam has addressed all of these issues. The Split V2 is a very similar form factor to the Split V1, but inside a lot has been improved. It takes 5 volts up to 17 volts input, so up to a 4-cell LiPo. You can just power it directly off of battery voltage. And although you might think that powering off a battery voltage would have more problems with video noise, my experience is that many people who ran the Split V1 off 5 volts had all kinds of problems they needed to solve with video noise, either because the 5-volt regulator was not just absolutely clean or because of grounding issues. Anyway, so it'll run straight off your LiPo and keep things simple. This is the Wi-Fi module for the Split V2, and you can see it just plugs into the side of the board and it sticks out. So it's very easy to get this in there when it's mounted in the stack. As long as you have access to the USB port, you'll also have access to the Wi-Fi module. They've used an HDMI, a micro HDMI connector here, which might seem a little confusing at first since it's not really a video output. But it's actually a really clever thing they've done because it prevents any confusion as to which one of these you're going to plug in. It just plugs right in here. This Wi-Fi module, obviously you're not going to leave this plugged in when you're flying. So again, it's very nice that there's this plug here that you can easily plug it in real quick, do things like configure the settings or check the video, and then you can unplug it and go fly. Here on the top of the Split, they've added this metal shield here. One of the things this does is it acts a little bit as a heat sink. It helps cool the module. Some people noticed that the Split V1 got super, super hot when it was recording. Another thing it does, though, is it's got this little tab here to hold the SD card in. And they've also transitioned from the SD card holder on the Split V1 had kind of a flip up door, but it was kind of impossible to flip it up unless it was mounted on the top of your stack, which many people didn't want to do. So now they've gone to the standard insertion style. And the problem with those is that in very hard crashes, occasionally the card can come flying out. Now, I'm Mr. Black Box, and I have an SD card on all of my flight controllers, and most of them are this insertion style. And I have only like once in all the time I've been flying lost an SD card. So it's not that common of a problem, but it is nice that you've got this little tab here to help retain, and it's easy to get this card in and out if you need to. Of course, you can download all the footage over the USB connector, so you don't need to take it out if you don't want to, but sometimes it's easier to just take it out. This, then, is the Split Mini, and it's got the same functionality that we've been talking about, just in a smaller and lighter form factor, tailored for quads with a 20mm stack. The main thing that the Split Mini is missing, that the Split V2 has, is the Wi-Fi connector. There just wasn't room on here, I guess, to put the connector for the Wi-Fi module. But the good news is that you can configure this. Well, of course, you can configure it with these little buttons by looking in your goggles. It's a little tedious to move through the menus. Well, long press to move and short press to accept. You can get it done, though. The other thing that the Split has is if you hook it to a UART on your flight controller, then in beta flight, you can activate some of the functions. You can do things like start and stop recording. You can switch modes, and there are a few. I'll show you what some of the other things you can do. The other thing you can do, just go look it up. Just go look it up. Go look it up. Don't hand wave. It's your job now. You can't hand wave. You got to get the details right. Okay, what are the modes? What are the damn modes? Camera control 1, camera control 2, and camera control 3? Really? That's what we got? What does that mean? Damn it. The other thing you can do is Betaflight basically has the ability to remotely press the buttons on the side of the camera using aux switches on your transmitter. So you wire the Runcam Split up to a UART and you set it up in the ports tab as a peripheral. And then by flipping switches on your transmitter, you can start and stop recording. You can turn Wi-Fi on and off. You can change from photo to video mode. And you can even enter the menu and move around the menu. The exact way to do that is not a topic of this video. I do have a video on how to set up flight control modes in Betaflight, though, and I'll put a link to that in the upper right-hand corner of the video. What about the performance of the cameras? Well, I'm going to show you some sample footage in a minute, and we'll also compare the footage to a GoPro Hero 5 session, and we'll see how they look. Here are the things that we know, though. And I have to say thank you very, very much to RC Shim. His review of this camera was super, super in-depth. And one of the things he does that I just don't have the equipment to do is test the latency of the cameras. You need an oscilloscope and a photodiode. And my opinion is if somebody else is doing a kick-ass job at something, there's no reason for me to do it just for the sake of saying I did it. So I've got a link to his review of the Runcam Split V2 down in the video description. You should definitely check that out if you want to see the full results. But he concluded that the latency on the live out, in other words, if you use the Runcam Split as your primary FPV camera, not just to record high def, the latency on the live out is actually pretty decent as long as you go to 1080p 60 and NTSC. The latency at that point is around 35 milliseconds, which some people would consider that slow. It's certainly a little slower than like a Runcam Swift, which is or an 1177. Those sort of CCD cameras that we all flew with forever and nobody had a problem with the latency. So it's a little slower, but 35 milliseconds isn't like end of the world slow. Depending, I mean, maybe if you're like a hot snot racer, then it is. But certainly good enough for many people, and especially if you're looking at the Runcam Mini, where you're getting high def recording without a lot of the weight, it might be an acceptable trade-off. But if you are running PAL And if you're running 1080p 30 on the Runcam Split, then the latency is up in the 65 millisecond range, which is really too slow to be. I mean, it's flyable, but it's pretty freaking slow. Why would the video rate at which you're recording affect the live out latency in that way? And why, in fact, does recording at 60 frames per second actually have less latency on the live out than 30? I don't know, but thanks to RC Shim, we know that that's true. Hey, I mentioned weight. Let's weigh these. Runcam Split V2, 26 grams. Runcam Split Mini, 17 grams. Pretty freaking respectable, honestly. Oh, I had the SD card in the Split V2. Let's be fair. SD card, 0 grams. 15, 16. Make up your mind. 16. It's lighter. You put the SD card in and it gets lighter. Okay, then. Let's get this guy mounted inside a quad. Now, this... Okay, yeah. We're going to start here with the live out. This is what you would see in your DVR or your goggles if you're using the Split as your primary FPV camera. The audio here, though, is the high-def recording from the SD card, not the crackly DVR that you would hear if you had a microphone. This, then, is a GoPro Hero 5 session. This is high-def recording, of course, but we're keeping the Split V2 audio. And this is the Runcam Split high-def recording. And the experience that you're having right now is the same experience that I had the first time I looked at this this footage. This is not a setup. I just wanted you to have the authentic experience that I had. I went through everything, installing the camera in the Chameleon. I put it in the Chameleon. I don't know. I thought it would be a good frame to put it in. I flew it, and as you saw in the DVR, it looked fine in the DVR. But here we can actually see the very front of the Chameleon's front end camera cage. And this is because the field of view of the camera in high def mode is wider than the field of view in FPV mode. This is something that was true for the Runcam Split V1, and it continues to be true for the Runcam Split V2. One of the ways to solve this is to put a narrower angle camera lens on, but then everything is narrow. You don't want a narrow camera angle from your high-def recording. You want a nice wide super view. Well, anyway, some people want a narrower one, but not many people who are flying FPV. So I guess the takeaway here is that you have to think about how the frame that you're going to use is going to mount the Runcam Split. The reason that it looks like this is that the camera is set back a little further than a normal FPV camera lens would be. And you're going to want to find a frame that allows you to push the camera forward, basically flush with, or maybe even a little forward of the front standoffs, or in some other way mounts the camera so that the field of view is clear. Of course, the problem with that is that if the camera is pushed slightly forward or flush with the front standoffs, then it's more likely to be damaged, which of course is a bad thing. Yeah, that's a trade-off that you make when you fly with this camera. But hey, you're saving a ton of weight, and you know the pros and cons just have to be weighed. Let's keep watching the footage. The GoPro here is in standard GoPro Color mode. This is not GoPro ProTune Flat or anything like that. In fact, ProTune was disabled. Flying through the trees here, we can see the effect of the wide dynamic range. The CMOS style image in DVR mode is similar to the Runcam Eagle or other CMOS cameras from Runcam, I think is a pretty good looking image, although some people don't like that CMOS style image. Well, if you really hate a CMOS style image, then you're not going to want to, this isn't the camera for you. Going in and out of the trees here helps see how these cameras deal with changing lighting conditions. And you can compare the GoPro to the Runcam and see which one you like better. I think they all do a pretty good job here. The Split does appear to have a slightly more contrasty image than the GoPro. If you're the kind of person who uses a GoPro, you might prefer to fix that in post using GoPro Pro Tune Flat, but many people just want to fly and get their footage out. Overall, I think the Split V2's image looks really good. Whether you think it's better than the GoPro, I mean, that's a matter of some subjectivity, but I think this is one of the best looking Runcam high-def recordings that I've seen. The hyper blue sky that is sometimes the case in Runcams is not there, and the over-sharpened image of the Runcam 3 also isn't there. This is a really good looking image, and I think, especially given the price difference between this and a GoPro, and the weight difference between this and a GoPro, I think this is a good choice for many people. I should also add that the Runcam Split here is running off of battery voltage directly. So we're not doing any voltage filtering or anything like that. It's not running off a regulator, there's no capacitors, and we're having a reasonably noise-free image from the DVR, so that's quite good as well. Of course, that's going to vary depending on your motors and your ESCs, but we at least know that it's capable of being clean even without filtering. Now let's take a look at the Runcam Split Mini. And despite the fact that they named it the Split Mini, it actually fits in the same form factor as a micro-sized camera. So if you've got a Swift Micro or a Sparrow Micro or a Foxeer Aero Micro, any of those, if you've got a frame that's sized to hold them, this camera will fit in it. It's a little confusing that they called it the Split Mini when it's really a micro-sized camera, but hey, what can you do? Here's a photo of the Split mounted on top of a 20mm stack on a 3-inch or maybe it was a 2-inch quad. I got my friend Zav FPV to do this since he has a whole bunch of micro quads and I didn't have one that would, well, anyway, I got him to do it. And you'll have to note, he had to put longer standoffs on this. He had to do some special work to try and get it to fit. You can see we've got here a 4-board stack. And a lot of these micro frames will have trouble fitting it unless you're using a single board flight controller and ESC. Something like the HDLRC Zeus is one. We did a build with that. So you're going to need to make sure that you have room to put the extra 2 boards for the Split Mini in your quad. But when you do, here's what you're going to get. As we transition here to the live out view, this is the FPV DVR. This is what you see in the goggles. We can see that one difference between the Split Mini and the Split V2 is that the Split Mini is using the full image sensor both for the live out and the HD recording. And what that means is that the difference between the HD image and the FPV image is just that the edges are cut off. If we go back and forth between them, you can see it's an identical framing, just that we're cutting off the edges. Whereas with the Split V2, the HD image is much, much wider, and you're seeing there's a much bigger difference in the Split V2 between the FPV image and the HD image. And that helps, well, when you're mounting the camera, I think it's going to make a big difference. For the Split V2, you have to do a lot of work to mount the camera such that the front standoffs or whatever are not in the way. Whereas on the Split Mini, if you don't see those standoffs or motors in your live out in your FPV feed, you're going to be not as likely to see them in your HD recording. And that's going to bring us to the end of this review. As Xavier, it looked like he fail-safed there, didn't it? Anyway, that's going to bring us to the end of this review. Folks, the Runcam Split Mini and the Runcam Split V2, here's my conclusion about them. I feel pretty confident making this conclusion, or I would just say, well, you decide. I think the image quality on them is the best I've seen from a Runcam. And at a price of $80, they're both $80, so just pick the one that's sized right for your quad. That's I mean, gosh, compare that to something like a Mobius. I think we're just kicking the butt of a camera like that in terms of image quality and in terms of convenience, getting this camera mounted instead of your FPV camera. Does it beat a GoPro? No, but it beats a GoPro on price. You go buy like 4 of these for the price of a GoPro. So if you're a top pro pilot trying to, get all those sexy YouTube views, then you're probably going to get a GoPro. But for a lot of people, $80 for a camera that mounts the way this one mounts, it has acceptable latency for a lot of people, could replace your FPV camera, and especially the Split Mini. There's just nothing else you're going to get on a 2-inch quad or a 3-inch quad that can do what this does. So thank you guys so much for watching. Product links are down in the video description. Leave any questions or comments down in the comments. And as always, happy flying.